Hello, this is Rebekah Freedom, and this is episode number 40 of Heard Not Seen, produced by John Beethan. And today we're going to get into the complicated layers of sexuality, specifically bisexuality, gender fluidity, and how it impacts and reflects on our internal being and our relationships. So this is going to be a journey, and if you're not okay with sex or sexuality or talking about the spectrum of sex and the way that we play, then I encourage you to jump ahead or behind and listen to any of my other more mellow podcasts. And by mellow, I mean they're all explicit. So maybe you just go on this journey with me. Buckle up. Here we go. So in my lifetime of dating, in the realm of dating, there's been a theme that has come up several times. And one of the things I want to say is it won't really make sense without you knowing the backdrop that I was raised in the church, as my dad was a pastor. I was born in Bible school. I was raised with the Christian doctrine, very much to believe in the New Testament version of the Bible, not necessarily atonement, which is really more Old Testament, but that, God died for your sins and you're washed by the blood of the Lamb, and that love is the championing force, but there are right and wrong ways to do things. The right way to be in relationship is to be heterosexual and have the man be the head of the household, and for the woman to contribute in the domestic role. And that when you have sex, you should wait for marriage. You should wait for a ceremonial agreement, and all the other really deep-seated tenets of Christianity that go with us. The 10 Commandments, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And I don't know the rest of them. Of course, we'll add them in podcasts. That's how good of a Christian I am. I have forgotten all except for don't covet. Don't look at the other guy and be like, I want what you got. I want it over there. You got the thing that I want. I want that. I'm going to covet your wife. So I have this template, this very strong, ingrained part of me that feels like the right way to be in the world is to be heterosexual. So fast forward out of my youth and going to a Christian school and having this, indoctrinated me over and over and over. I went to Faith Christian from second grade all the way through senior year, and I was homeschooled before that. But the Bible has been with me my whole life. The scriptures in the book and various interpretations, depending on the denomination of whether you go to Methodist or Episcopalian or Lutheran or whatever. There's different, more intense interpretations of it. I was raised Pentecostal, which is the Holy Rollers, which is, the revelation and God is coming back. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Sister, brother, rise up in your seats and worship the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah. And there's been moments where I have felt the Holy Spirit watch over me and have had the experience of speaking in tongues. And it's a righteous and amazing experience. So I say all of that to say that we all have belief systems that sort of dictate how we navigate our gender and our sexuality and our biology and how we be in our bodies. And my experience is after graduating high school, going to South Dakota State University, I started to be exposed to a little bit more of the world, which is interesting to think that in South Dakota, I got a greater perspective on the world because it's generally a conservative state, a conservative place. Unfortunately, I had radical professors that just knew how to bring it. And because I was studying psychology and development, one of the concepts that was introduced is that sexuality runs on a spectrum. It's not simply hetero or homo sexuality. which is just hetero meaning different in Latin and homo meaning the same, because certainly homo has been turned into a derogatory term. And on that spectrum, you have, people that are very distinctly aligned with their sexual identity as completely heterosexual. They're not turned on, even sometimes even repulsed by the idea of being with the same sex. They just don't find that sort of interaction arousing at all. And conversely, people on the homosexual end of the spectrum don't find a heterosexual interaction arousing. Of course, and then bisexual would be sort of like, you would think, the middle point, a little bit of both, but it's not that cut and dry. There's, I like to say that there's percentages. There's 80-20, 70-30, 60-40, sometimes 62.4, 5, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 5, and then the other side of that. And that life, as we develop and evolve and grow and have more experiences, opens us up to different things. So my first experience of this is when I was at Black Hills State, and I had a friend, Guy, who we lived in the dorms, and he lived on the floor above me. And I remember he was obsessed with Little Debbie oatmeal icing cookies. He'd sit and just eat a whole box, and he was so skinny. And he was just from this guy from Baker, Montana, whose parents owned a ranch. He grew up branding cattle, came to college. And I went to a party with him, and when you party in college, there's a couple like staples, and Boones Farm is one of them, which is like this $1 horrific drink that you buy at like Walmart, and it tastes like sugar and regret. But I was at a party, I was halfway through a Boones Farm, and I was looking at Guy, and I was like, God, he's really cute. But what happened is that weeks before that, he came out to me and he was like, Rebekah, I was up in his room while he was eating his Little Debbies, and I'm sitting there, and he looks at me and goes, Rebekah, I have something to tell you. And I was like, what? And we'd known each other for about a year. He goes, I'm bisexual. And I was like, yeah, I know. And then continued on. But I found this interesting attraction towards him. And when I was drinking and around him at the party, I was like, and he went through this really interesting evolution where I was attracted to him, and he was exploring his sexuality, and he was making out with girls, and he was making out with guys, and he was having these different sort of experiences. Categorically, he was making out with 2 people at once or whatever. And he was having all these things. And I was encountering like this interesting attraction to him, but this repulsion as well. And suffice to say, we remained friends throughout the duration of college. But that was really one of the first, there was one of the guys, and not the first, actually. There was another guy who, when I was before I went to Black Hills State, I was in community college, and he pursued me really heavily. And I was like, I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it. And his name was Patrick, and Patrick came out years later as gay. Like, I was like the last girl that he was really into, and then he's been with his partner Casey ever since. So those were like some early experiences, and then life went on, and I was single for a while, and I dated another guy, and there was no inkling of that in a relationship. And then Roy, he was pretty heterosexual on the spectrum as far as our interactions went. There wasn't any real play there. And then I dated another guy, Dan, who was totally bisexual. That was like, he didn't identify it until we started dating, because there was space enough for him to be accepted in it and not have to necessarily hide it. And that was an even deeper dynamic and a harder challenge for me, because I identify as roughly 80-20, where I'm, 80% heterosexual. Like, I've had experimentations with women where it's just been kissing or making out. I've never had sex with a woman, or a woman's never had sex with me, which is probably going to be a relief to my family if they ever listen to this. Haha, sorry, Mom. Dad, aunts, uncles, everybody who's conservative listening to this. So Dan and I, we got together, and on the onset, there's some like funny parts of it where I was talking to him about blowjobs, and I'm like, God, there's just such work. You wouldn't have any idea you do understand what they mean. Because he liked exploring with guys. And I will say there's a difference in, when you're with somebody of the same gender versus when you're with somebody who's not of the same gender. So when I did experiment, #college, with women, or when I was, actually in my grad school program, there's one girl and I who made out, and I was like, girls are just softer. They're just nicer, generally gentler, just overall, it's like a nice experience. It's like it's like a warm flame versus a freaking flamethrower. It's not as intense as being with some guys. And certainly there's guys that have gentle touch, but guys have beards. Like you sign up for having an exfoliated face when you date a guy sometimes, and it's just different. It's just a softer touch. And conversely, when I was talking with Dan and we would have these like in-depth conversations, these really like soul-bearing conversations about being with the same sex, he would share, he's like, sometimes the strength of a man is what I need. So what happens in the context of the sexual play is you start to feel the masculine and the feminine sides balance out. You start to feel like, when I was with Dan and he would be really feminine, my masculine side would rise up. It was like my sex is female, but what was running the show was like the directive, the action oriented, the get it done part of me that was like, I will handle it. I'm the one who's going to be the dominant one here. And he was more of the passive person in the role of surrender, receiving, sort of, the ever shifting emotions that comes with the feminine side of things. And so playing with different bodies, playing with, male and male will, augment the polarity. Like if you're naturally more of a male person and you're in the bisexual experimentation or bi-curious experimentation and you play with another male, it's like dominant meets dominant, and you start to find the areas that you can surrender and let go. And sexually, it's like if you want to be the person giving the blowjob or you're the one on the bottom receiving, then that's more of a surrendering role. And I know that people, obviously, we have a society now where it's where play in this spectrum is not as rigid as it used to be. It's sort of like, bi-curious is a term, or situationally bisexual, or again, there's I think 56 different terms for our gender now, ambi and poly, and a lot of different Latin terms added to sex. And of course we'll add some of what those are. Pansexual is, trisexual. I'll try anything. So for each individual, I would say that our lifetime is to explore and to find out our deepest expression of who we be. And And sexuality and gender is certainly one of the major filters, and biology. Like if we're born with a vagina, but we feel that we're more masculine, male inside, then there's a trans situation, a transgendered situation, or a transsexual situation where your body doesn't match your soul, so to speak. And then our lifetime is this playground to explore our deepest sexual expression, to explore who we be through sex, through connection. And it creates some edges in relationships. It creates some areas of what my friend describes as a hard no or deal breakers in relationships. Now, I can't speak to anybody else's relationship. I have witnessed my friends play in bi-poly fluid situations where they'll have threesomes, foursomes, fivesomes. The guys will, there'll be different boundary setting where it's like they'll be kissing but no penetration. They'll be touching but only from the waist up. There'll be different agreements that happen in these the poly play where it's like three or more people touching and exploring and exacting pleasure in their bodies and just, getting the adrenaline rush from it and creating that peak of connection. There's certainly different ways to do that. So that's a whole other thing. Monogamous, just, two people just being in the committed realm where it's a very closed relationship. A marriage type relationship where it's marriage, basically. The definition of marriage is monogamy. You're monogamous. I belong to you. You belong to me. We belong to the marriage. We are vowed in and we are under oath and under dictate and under law. We are beholden to one another. And that's definitely, I think, the core value system, core value way of being in a relationship is the monogamous relationship. There isn't partner play outside of it. If there is, it's cheating. You're cheating, you have infidelity in the relationship. And often people just can't, they don't traverse that. They're like, that's beyond my capacity or flexibility to go beyond that. So that's an edge. The configuration of the relationship. Is it going to be just monogamous, two people creating this one thing? Or is it going to be an open relationship, more polyamorous, meaning that normally there is a primary partner, a primary relationship in one of the structures of polyamory, where both partners have secondary boyfriends, girlfriends, playmates, or whatever. And there's agreements that form within that partnership around what play is acceptable and what play is not acceptable. Of course, the Bible for polyamory is the Ethical Slut. It's been around quite some time. I know there's several other books written on it, but I would say that is the go-to book about how to communicate really openly. And that's what we can learn from poly, is that in a monogamous relationship, sometimes it also creates a lot more expectation or suppositions, and you don't communicate your way through them. You don't say, well, I'm attracted to somebody else. What does that bring up for you? How do we navigate this together? So tons of complicated things to get through just to be able to be fully expressed, accepted, and to relate to somebody else. Validation is at the core of all of this, right? Can I be who I be and survive in the world? Can I be accepted? Can I belong to something? Can I be fully expressed and it still be okay? So I have a story, per usual, because how could I be Rebekah Freedom if I didn't have a story? There's this thing that happened about a month ago that led to some other things. the revolving in the world of dating and seeing one person. And the things that are being introduced or that are part of the exploration that's happening right now are bisexuality, partner play, sort of a version of open relationship, but also breaking down the dichotomy of either or and entering into more of an and reality. So that's all very vague. So what I'll say is that my partner we've had discussion about what play would feel good and acceptable and where my edges are. So I can't speak for him, nor would I ever want to, but I owned my edge around saying, listen, I totally get, like, freedom is the most important thing. And that's actually adding to the depth of love and connectedness we feel, because there's not like this obligation or a real conditional, if you act like this, then I'll love you. It's just like, you be who you be, and I'll receive that and see how that makes me feel. It's very, there is a flow to the exchange that's happening right now. And recently, like as in last night, I brought up a topic again where I said, as far as whatever we're uncovering and discovering here, one thing feels really true for me, which is like, I don't want to be with a guy who's with other guys. As far as the monogamous piece of the relationship, I'm not settled on that structure being the structure. So there's some openness there, some room for exploration. But for me, I was like, I've been in a relationship where I was with somebody who was bisexual, and I had the experience of not enoughness because of it. Like, I can't ever be a sex male. Like, I can't, if I go buy a strap on, fine, but I didn't, because it wasn't ever something I wanted to go into. And so, I'm getting all the clumps talking about it. It's just hot. Like, it's a hot topic because it was what my friend and I talked about, and she's been in the poly community and exploring, and she said it's a hard no. It's just a no. It's not, no is the beginning and the end of the conversation. It's not like there's more explanation that needs to come. There's not like a mining of the depth of like, oh, is there some sexual trauma or a trauma as a childhood? Or it comes down to sometimes that you just know within your being, there's a knowing that is your preference. That is something that is identified inside of you that's like, I simply don't want to invest my energy traversing that. Like, that's not how I want to invest my energy in this exchange, in this relationship. And I owned it. And I was like, it's about 90-10. 90% of me is aware that if that's something you choose, I don't have a point of view about that choice for you, but I have a point of view of how it impacts me. And because I know it hits all the Christian things, it hits and ultimately it's a preference. I don't want to be with a guy who's with guys. There's a visceral feeling in my body. It's a visceral no. It's just a no. And I can layer stories onto it. And what happened is as I introduced this, all of a sudden a condition came into our exchange. And he didn't like it at all. There was this sense of like anger that came up, like almost like an injustice or a rejection for him, and this sense of like, God, it totally sucks, the idea that if I did choose this for me because it was something that was light for me and I wanted to go down that path, that it would mean losing out on the intimacy with you. I said it would transition our relationship out of an intimate space, and I would definitely step back into more of a friendship role or supportive role that's like, explore, go do your thing. I'm just not going to participate in that. And edgy, super edgy. And interestingly enough, as I'm doing this podcast, one of the pieces he said, can we just not talk about this anymore? That's my request. Like, it's bringing up stuff. It seems like we're circling around it. We can't make our way through it. I don't know what to do about it. I don't like the idea of losing out on something and choosing something else. And here's what I have to say as a blanket statement is life comes in trade. It comes in trade. I'm sorry, like in relationships, like the idea of utopia and us getting along all the time and there just being this free flowing energy. Certainly, hopefully there is a lot of that. But when you decide to share bills or have a home or have children or travel or whatever you choose for yourself impacts the relationship. It impacts your partner. So you have to make choices. I'm not testifying to him, by the way. I'm just saying in a blanket, large, general way, the choices you make come in trade. Like if you say, I'm going to date this person and these are the structures of our relationship, it might mean that another person you lose out on. You don't get to, if you choose to date somebody who is like stocky and bulky, then maybe you lose out on some guy who's sleek and tall, or you say like, I'm just doing this in trade. Like I'm not going to just have like a harem of people. And some people can navigate that and choose that for themselves. They can make it a really interesting, dynamic place of curious self-expression. One of the movies that does so well with this, oh my God, it's one of my favorite movies. It's such a chick flick, is Vicky, Cristina, Barcelona. Oh my God, so good. It's these two girls, one who is very conservative and by the book, and another girl who just flies by the seat of her pants. One blonde, one brown. Of course, the brunette is the serious one. And they decide to go to this trip to Barcelona. And she's studying I think it's the Catalan culture. I'll look it up, but they basically, what happens is they are seduced by Juan Pablo, the male character, and both have affairs with him. And he had a dynamic relationship with this other woman who just didn't work, but it did work when he got a new girlfriend, and it was a triad. There could be three of them that would play together, and it made everything work. But inevitably, things fall apart, and it's a lesson in self-reflection and what we choose in our life, and if we want to stay in the conservative realm of acceptable parameters of relationship, or if we want to go out and play in it. And let's just take a little breath here, because that's just so much information to receive. Like, who you be in your body, like how do you create with your body, right? With the curves of your body, with the sinew, whether you're an athletic person and you're expressed in that way in the world, and you exact your attraction through your athletic prowess and your dominance, whether male or female, or if you're a softer, more poetic body that has curves and angles and different gesticulations to it, and your attraction is something that might be subtle, or even just something that can be arrived upon slowly through the experience of it. I think of women who when you look at them at first, they're not classically beautiful, but if you gaze at them long enough, like a Monet or a painting. When you go to Monet, you might be like, this is just a fuzzy painting, but then you begin to see like the depth of color and the movement. And I think of women that have like freckled faces or pronounced noses or thin lips but strong jaws, or men that are generally are not angular. They have more round features, and there's not that, or a little bit of a gut or a belly in there. You would pass them by. You would generally pass them by as just ordinary. And then the thing that happens is personality does this weird thing with our perception of other people's bodies. You can think about the template, the ideal of the Adonis figure, the Brad Pitts, right? The Clooneys, the Denzel Washingtons with the symmetrical faces in their youth. But as time goes by, they age and their color is different, and therefore the attraction changes. For different people, they're more attractive, and for others, they're not. But there's this thing, again, personality, where you meet somebody and they can be, a San Diego 6, which is, a San Diego 6 would be like a South Dakota 10. Geographically can make a difference have an impact. Well, and you talk to them and they have all this world experience where they've traveled, they have contributed to society, they have helped elevate people out of desperate situations, they've given themselves to service, they're curious and explorative in the arts, well-read, intelligent, enjoy food, just are dolce vita, living the sweet life. They're living that, and their articulations and expressions of who they be then creates this magnetism, this current of attraction. And that current of attraction can sometimes supersede the gender, the sexual preference, the identification. And it becomes so about the soul of the person. And it becomes about how you feel when you're with them, who you be. Like if they're fully expressed in this fearless place, then that gives you permission to try to do the same and to ride those edges, to ride the edges that show up. Because every relationship has a structure that is going to support a certain level of expression, and there'll be edges to it where it says, and that is where I end. Judgment is the edge of your awareness. When you judge something, you say, I don't want to be aware of what I know beyond this point. I have access to all of it. I have access, my soul has access to all different perspectives. But in this realm, I don't want to be aware beyond this certain point. So, what came of our conversation around my hard no about that's just not what I want to spend my time with. It's not the direction I want to go in when it comes to being intimate with somebody. If they're choosing to be intimate in a beyond heterosexual play. And interestingly enough, that felt maybe there was some irony there. It's like, oh, it's okay if I play with other women. I'm like, yeah, that's a different genre. That's non-monogamy. If you're going to go really compartmentalize this, that's non-monogamy versus the other compartment of bisexuality, of playing with other people, which is non-monogamy with, same-sex partners. And that's something I said I don't want to choose. And the interesting thing that came up was a frustration reflected back at me around maybe I have some unattended to shame that I may not be willing to work through that would get me past this point. What I want to say about that is no is a full conversation. It doesn't require an explanation. Sometimes no is really our knowing about where we want to put our energy and where we're willing to be led. Time, of course, I say that. A hard no is something that you have to trust trust that boundary. Trust the boundaries you're creating. Trust that they will be a contribution to your relationships. Trust that if you feel like you're losing out on something, the thing that you will always lose out on is the truth of yourself. Like, do not emotionally contort or change or try to amend or edit yourself, because I believe that love is honesty. Tell your truth and hold and just be in it and let it rise into you till you can hear it and say, and then check back, is that actually true for me? Is that really true for me? So I would say at this time, this is true for me. What will it look like over the course of my life? I don't know. I don't have to know. And I think that we are in a time in our world where we're intensely curious about the souls that are inhabiting our bodies. Who am I in this lifetime? And how will I be best expressed? So if you're in that query around the structure of your relationship, monogamy, open, closed, around your gender, your fluidity, if you're expressed, as, Miley Cyrus and the Happy Hippie Foundation is a really great resource for this conversation around gender identity and how you're showing up. And of course, in the ways that it's impacting your relationship and your expressions, I invite you to have that conversation with me directly by reaching out to me at RebekahFreedom.com. That's REBEKAH freedom.com. Thank you for listening, and be set free.